Kobe Bryant is one of the best players to ever set foot on a basketball court. He has accomplished so much throughout his 20 years in the league, and because he had such a memorable career, some impressive feats just fly under the radar. Many people know Kobe as one of the greatest scorers of all time, or winning 3 championships in a row and then winning 2 more without Shaq, or being arguably the most skilled player of all time on offense while locking up your favorite guard or wing on defense. Kobe had a legendary career, and the most underrated aspect was his competition in the West. The 2000s had some of the toughest competition of all time, and a lot of these teams were found in the Western Conference. Kobe would have to face these teams year after year, and there were plenty of times where Kobe led the Lakers through the Western Conference, and it isn't talked about enough. There were many great teams in the West during the 2000s, and the main ones were the San Antonio Spurs, Dallas Mavericks, Phoenix Suns, and Sacramento Kings. These other 4 teams were so dominant that if you include the Lakers as well, they made up 75% of the teams to make it to the second round in the West from 2001 to 2010. During the late 90s and early 2000s, the Spurs were led by the Twin Towers. Tim Duncan was a young star in the league and was paired with an aging David Robinson. The Spurs would win the 1999 NBA championship over the New York Knicks, and they cemented themselves as one of the best teams in the league. As David Robinson grew older, the Spurs added Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili. Duncan, Parker, and Manu would create amazing chemistry together and would be an iconic Big Three. The Spurs would also win 3 more championships in 2003, 2005, and 2007. Tim Duncan would cement himself as a top 10 player of all time at the same time as Kobe Bryant. These 2 players would fight to be the face of the decade and competed against each other multiple times. In the playoffs, the Lakers matched up against the Spurs 6 times and won 4 of the 6 series. The Dallas Mavericks started in the 2000s with Dirk Nowitzki, Michael Finley, and Steve Nash. Dirk and Nash were young upcoming stars, and Michael Finley was an underrated player. He was a veteran that put up an efficient 20 points a game with the Mavs. They would consistently finish the season with a top record in the league and would make deep runs in the playoffs, but would always fail to win it all. In 2006, they made it to the NBA Finals, but would blow it. Dallas would continue to constantly be a championship contender, but would never win it all until 2011. Dirk would lead the Mavericks to one of the most valuable championships in history against Miami's Big Three. The Phoenix Suns would acquire Steve Nash through a trade with the Dallas Mavericks before the 2005 NBA season. Steve Nash made an impact instantly, and he would win the MVP. The Suns were the 13th seed in the West the year prior, and now they had the number 1 record in the league. They went to the conference finals that year, but lost to the Spurs. Nash would win another MVP the next season, and would match up against Kobe and the Lakers in the first round. The Lakers had the 7th seed, while the Suns had the 2 seed. Throughout the season, Kobe would average a career-high 35 points a game and put the Lakers team on his back. No one else on the team could score over 15 points a game. The Suns were the team expected to win, but the Lakers would put up a fight. The Lakers pushed the Suns to 7 games, and Bryant led the way. He averaged an efficient 28 points a night to go with 6 rebounds and 5 assists. He even had a 50-point game in overtime in hopes to win the series, but the Lakers would fall short. The very next year, the same matchup happened in the first round. Kobe would put on a show once again, but it wasn't enough. He averaged 33 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists in the series, but the Suns were able to close them out in 5 games. The Suns were a competitive team, but other teams in the West stopped them from winning a championship in the 2000s. The early 2000s Sacramento Kings are one of the most underrated teams in NBA history. They didn't have a big superstar like Kobe or Shaq, but they were incredibly deep and talented. They were led by Chris Webber, Peja Stojakovic, Mike Bibby, and Vlade Divac. Everyone on the team could pass, and that led to a motion-heavy offense and a very fast-paced style. They were ahead of their time in this way, and the NBA hadn't seen a team play like this. 2002 was their most successful season. They got the number 1 record in the league, and they had true championship hopes. In the playoffs, they only lost 2 games in the first 2 rounds and were headed to the conference finals. In the Western Conference Finals, The back-to-back champions were the team to beat. The teams coming out of the East were no match for either team, so this was going to be the most important series of the season. Each game in this series came down to single-digit points, besides Game 3 where the Kings won by 13. The Kings went up 3-2 in the series and had a chance to go to the finals. The Lakers won Game 6, but there are theories that the game was rigged. The Lakers got 27 free throws in the fourth quarter, and that helped them win the game by 4 points. Regardless, the Lakers pulled off an incredible win and would later go on to win Game 7 and the championship. The Lakers faced the Kings 3 times in the playoffs and would win the series each time. There were 4 main teams Kobe and the Lakers were challenged by, but there were many other teams as well. I didn't even mention teams like the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves were a team that was always competitive in the early 2000s, but peaked in 2004. Kevin Garnett had one of the greatest peaks in NBA history, and he would dominate on both sides of the ball. They got the number 1 record in the West and would see the Lakers in the conference finals. KG put up a fight, but Kobe and Shaq were too much to handle. The series would last for 6 games, and the Lakers would go to the NBA Finals. Kobe and the Lakers only faced Minnesota in one other series. It was the year prior in the first round, and that had a similar result. The series went to 6 games as well, and Kobe averaged 32 points a game in the series to go with 5 rebounds and 7 assists on 43, 36, and 87 shooting splits. I also didn't mention teams like the Nuggets led by Carmelo Anthony and Allen Iverson, the Rockets led by Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming, or the aging Jazz team led by John Stockton and Karl Malone. The 2000s had some of the toughest competition in NBA history, and sometimes Kobe would make it out of the West, and sometimes he wouldn't. When Kobe had Shaq, it wasn't easy, but they did make it to the finals 4 times in 5 years. Sometimes coming out of the West was more impressive than winning the finals. The Western Conference Finals were the matchup of the year because whoever won would surely win the title. In other years, it was much harder. After Shaq had left the Lakers, the odds were heavily stacked against Kobe. He would try his best and would play like one of the best of all time, but that by itself wasn't enough. The Spurs would grow together during this time, and many other teams were improving and upgrading their roster. The Lakers wouldn't have a good enough second option on the team until the Lakers traded for Pau Gasol in 2008. That's when Kobe's amazing talent could be used to truly compete for a championship. The narrative was that he couldn't win without Shaq, and he proved them wrong. He won back-to-back championships in 2009 and 2010. Many fans hold praise for Kobe overcoming the Celtics and proving he could win without Shaq, which is extremely difficult, so the praise is warranted, but coming out of the Western Conference 3 times in a row is often overlooked, especially when the Lakers weren't a super stacked team. Kobe Bryant was so successful that his success clouds some of the very impressive accomplishments he has done throughout his career. There were plenty of times where Kobe led the Lakers through the West, and this often gets swept under the rug. He had one of the greatest careers of all time, and he left countless memories for us to hold on to. Even if we weren't there to see it, we can look back at all the amazing things Kobe has done for the sport we all know and love. We all know his greatest achievements, but we also need to know the amazing things he has done that often get overlooked. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I read every single comment, so let me know what you think in the comments down below. Subscribe for future basketball content, and thank you for watching.